Hello guys, and welcome back, or welcome here if you are new. My name is Amy. So in today's video I'm going to be talking all about some books that I've read so far in 2022. Now, several videos ago I mentioned that I was going to be doing like a quarterly reading update, but unfortunately that just has not panned out, and so I've just decided not to put any kind of parameters on these reading updates, and when I'm able to, or when I feel like I need to, that is when I'll go ahead and post them. And I say that because I'm making one today, but then I will have another one towards the end of May because I am participating in the Christian Fictionathon. And so that would be exciting, so I'm going to have to check back in and let you all know how that went. Alright, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get started, and I will show you the first book that I read this year. Now please keep in mind, I've mentioned this so many times, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but my reading goals are definitely going to be more on the minimal side because I'm working and I do full-time college. So just a little side note. So the first book that I read this year was Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers. I'm not going to go in much detail about this because I actually did a video with Oshina where we read this book together and then did a live show. That was so much fun. But yes, this was my first time ever reading this book, and it's been around for so long, and I think it remains one of the top Christian fiction books of all time. You guys, this story moved me in so many ways. There was so much to this story, and honestly there were times where I had to put it down just to kind of give myself like an emotional break, because there are some heavy topics in this book, but at the same time you get to see the love of God, and you get to see a story of redemption, of healing, and of love. It's just such a great classic Christian fiction book, and if you have not read this, then you really need to. Alright, after that I read The Huntress of Thornbeck Forest by Melanie Dickerson. Holly mentioned this book and it was in her tops for 2021, and one of my reading goals this year was to pick two books off of two different people's top 2021 books. And so yes, this one definitely took me out of my comfort zone because number one, I don't usually read fairy tale retellings, or I've never read a fairy tale retelling, and this one actually mimics the Swan Princess and Robin Hood, and so this story was just a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to read about this day and age. This actually takes place in like the medieval times, and so it was just really fun to hear, you know, all about that era. They had the Midsummer Festival, and you know, you just hear about things from, like I said, from that era. It's just really cool to hear about and how they spoke, like their verbiage, and I don't know, I'm interested in history as it is, and so that was really fun to read about. But basically you have Odette, she's the main character, so you pretty much follow her, and then she's got two suitors that are wanting this fair maiden. One of them is Jorgen, and he is a forester. And then you have Mathis, and he is the son of a wealthy merchant. And basically, she lives with her uncle because her parents have passed away. He took her in under his wing, and he's wealthy as well. And so, because she's single, she's kind of expected to marry like an upper class. But then she meets Jorgen, and they kind of get a connection. But once she realizes that he is the forester, well, that's when it causes some issues, because she is an archer and she does poach animals. Now there is a reason behind it, and all that is explained in the book, but this story is very good. It is actually book one in a series, so if you're into fairy tale retellings, I think that you would definitely enjoy this book. Next, Love and a Little White Lie by Tammy L. Gray, and this is one of my favorite books so far. I just loved this book so much. This book, I don't know, this book totally surprised me because I just enjoyed it so much. So let me just give you a brief overview. So you have January, and she was in a relationship that ended, and she just wanted like some space to try to figure out what to do next with her life. I believe she's from Texas, but she went to Georgia. Her aunt has like a big wedding venue, and she stayed in the guest house, and so she was just staying there for a while just to kind of get back on her feet. And she needed a job, and so her aunt is very active in her local church, and she found out that they were hiring like a part-time like pastoral assistant. And so January has a secret, and that is that she is an atheist. She does not believe in God, but she still goes in for the interview, and she gets hired. But inside, she's thinking, how can I work here if I don't even believe in God? She kind of wrestles with that in the story, but she ends up working for one of the pastors named Ralph. She gets involved like in his life in a way that was unexpected to me. I just really enjoyed. And then as she's working for Ralph, one of her assignments is to go through like the prayer request. And she finds one, and she ends up starting to visit someone in like a nursing home. There's a couple stories that happen there, but as she's working at the church, she gets introduced to a band member. He sings and does all that like on the praise and worship team. They meet and they kind of hit it off. However, her aunt is having some work done at their wedding venue, and the construction crew that she's hired, it's a son and a father duo, and so she starts to also make friends with this guy's son, and that story is a whole other story with him. There's just so many aspects of this book. So then, but like on the romance side, just kind of got two options, and it's just so good. I was happy with who she ended up with, but either way, I just love the book so much. And this also is book 1 in a series. I honestly could not put this book down. It was just so good to me. I would highly recommend this book if you're into like a contemporary Christian fiction romance, or if you just are into contemporary Christian fiction. I read Sea Rose Lane. This book is also in a series. I don't know where it falls in the series, but I read this one. Now this one I was not a big fan of. It was kind of boring, to be honest. There were some parts that I did like. There were some character stories that I could appreciate, but overall this was not one of my favorite books. I still saw it through to the end, and like I said, there were some storylines that I did appreciate, but basically you've got BJ, and that's like her nickname, and she is a contractor. Now she is actually a transplant. She used to live in California, and then she moved to Hope Harbor, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is in Oregon. I believe it's like in a beach town, but anyways, so she's lived there now for about 3 years, and she's a contractor. She's an architect, contractor, and she's working on this man's house. His son is like a lawyer, and he recently got laid off, and so he's coming back home and just have a little vacation before he dives back into like the job hunt and everything. So he comes back, and he's surprised when he shows up to his dad's house and it's under construction. He had like no idea. And so there's a whole story with him and his dad. There's a lot of stories in this book, and maybe that was another reason why it wasn't my favorite. Then you have stories with like one of the contractors. That was a tough story to read. It was pretty sad. And then you have another story going on in here with an elderly woman and like a side project that BJ is working on. Some of the stories I really did like, and that's why I saw it through. But overall, this was not my favorite book. Alright, so another book I read was The Enlightenment of Bees by Rachel Linden. This was actually a book club pick for a group that I'm in, and there was a lot of mixed reviews on this story, but I overall did enjoy it. So basically you have Mia, and she was engaged to someone for 6 years. That's a pretty long engagement. She thinks that her boyfriend is going to pop the question, but when he goes to do it, he just can't bring himself to actually do it, to propose. And so they end up breaking up, and all her dreams and her plans, their dreams suddenly are gone, and she's like, what do I do with myself? So she's poured so much of herself into this relationship over the years and building their life to come, and then all of a sudden it's like falling apart. So what she ends up doing is going on this like humanitarian trip with her best friend Rosie, and then a group of other people who signed up. And so they end up going to different countries. I really enjoyed hearing all about like the different customs, like the different foods, just like the different ways of life. I liked how they explained where they were at, the good or the bad. There is kind of like a side romance going on. One of the main things that really bugged me about this book is that it is under like Christian fiction, but it really made no reference to God whatsoever. Like the other books that I've spoken about today, they do reference God, and I do feel the faith content, but this one I just didn't have it at all. Now she did make reference to like Mother Teresa and the saints and, you know, different things, but no direct connotation really to God or anything like that. And so the faith content was definitely missing, but other than that, there was other things that I liked, and because I'm a Christian, I could see some elements that could point to God or point to like the Christian lifestyle, basically. Now, someone who is not a Christian, they may not pick up on that other than just being like a good person. I hope I explained that okay. There were some scenarios in the book where it was just kind of just too far off, like designer items in a refugee camp. That is just so far-fetched. And there were some other things that were kind of silly, but overall, you got to watch Mia's journey and everything, how all that unfolded. But there is a couple of other side stories, one with her grandmother, and then also I liked hearing about like her baking. She does mention these oatmeal butterscotch cookies, and they sounded so good. All right, next we have Stealing the Preacher by Karen Whitmire, and this book was recommended by Celestria, and this book was on one of her top books for 2021 as well. So that goal I have met. Now, I haven't exactly finished this book yet, but I'm so close. So as you can see, I'm almost done with the book, but yeah, this book has taken me a while to read, you guys, and it's not that I don't like it, because I do. It's a really cute book. Like, it's a good, steady story, but it's just not one that has me coming back like I have to read what's happening next. It's just a very, you know, steady paced book where I can just read a chapter here, a chapter there, and be good with it. So far, there's been a lot of cute moments, definitely a lot of faith content in here. This is kind of like, reminds me of like, I don't know, maybe Little House on the Prairie or something. It's just a really sweet, and I think of it as like a Western book. And Jo, she is the main character, Joanna, and she is so feisty, and this preacher comes to town because of her dad, and that whole situation and how the preacher even gets there. There's a lot of moments where this book has made me smile. There's a few things that I'm still waiting to wrap up, but overall, I really enjoyed this book, but I'm almost done. So lastly, this is another book that I've started reading recently, and that is A Bookshop by the Sea by Denise Hunter. Now see, this one I'm almost done with too, but this is one where I feel more compelled to know what's going to happen next. And I think it's just because these are the type of books that I love the most, and this is a contemporary romance. It definitely has more depth than just a romance, but it's a really good book. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because I will be talking about this in my May wrap up, because this book is the first book on my Christian fiction readathon list. Alright guys, I need to wrap up this video because the lighting is just going too crazy. I don't know if I did these books justice. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I wanted to say thank you all so much for supporting my channel and for supporting me. I love you all so much, and until next time, take care.